Welcome to the Real Assets, Real Leaders podcast, a show where we meet with leaders from across the energy, infrastructure, and real asset space to talk through their careers, their motivation, and their leadership ethos. My name is Joshua Fowkes, founder of Sonderometric Executive Search. I hope you enjoy the show. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Chris Elder, CEO of Fidra Energy. Chris, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you here.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
I'm really looking forward to our discussion today, Chris. There's loads to talk about, as we normally do. We're going to dive into a bit of work. We're going to dive into a bit of your personal journey as well. But really, there's only one place to start because as we stand recording here, we are about 1 week post financial close for one of the most significant battery storage projects ever undertaken in the UK. So over to you, Chris. Tell us a little bit about that, and then tell us how you're feeling as well.
Good starter. Yeah, no, I mean, feeling unbelievably excited. Very proud of what we've achieved. I think it's as you say, it's a landmark project for the sector. I think even more than that, it's a big project for the UK, right? In the sense that I think Bloomberg have called it the world's largest battery project, which, you know, when you think about, you know, a small team headquartered in Edinburgh building this enormous project, bigger than the Chinese projects, bigger than the Saudi projects, I think that's something to be proud of, right? So I think that we are all very excited as a team. We're all very conscious that we've got to go and deliver it now. So absolutely, we should be proud of the money that we've been able to raise, the project we put together, but very conscious now that the onus is on us to show that we can deliver it. And yeah, I think, as I say, it's just a phenomenal project.
Do you want to give us the headlines?
Yeah, so it's a 1.4 gigawatt, 3 gigawatt hour lithium battery storage project. It's based up near Doncaster, so in South Yorkshire. On the site of an old coal station. So I think in terms of sort of regeneration of industrial areas, it ticks that box. It has very, very strong local support. So we went through a planning process where we had no objections, which is fantastic.
Wow.
And it's really designed as a sort of 40-year life battery. So it's long life. It's going to be there for a while. Inclusive of financing costs, it costs about £750 million to build, just to give you an idea of it. And it will be built over 2 years, essentially. So we'll get the first unit, as we call them, operational in mid-2027, and then coming online over sort of the next 4 or 5 months. And just to give you an idea of scale, that serves up to about 800,000 homes over 2 hours of peak period. So it's a really, really big asset, 3 times bigger than anything else in the UK.
Wow, quite some numbers. And there's a sister site there as well, isn't there? West Burton.
Yeah, so we also have West Burton, which is a site we developed when we were part of West Burton Energy. So it's a small site, 500 megawatts.
Small by comparison.
Small by comparison, but it's a really exciting project. It's one that, as I say, we self-developed that site from conception through to where the project is now, which it has a grid connection, it has land, it has planning consent. And the goal is to take that project through to a final investment decision in Q1 next year. So again, to give you an idea of scale, you're talking about another sort of 200 odd million to deploy just into CapEx in that project. So these are sizable projects for the UK power system.
And I guess for many people in the industry, the name Fidra Energy probably only came up on the radar 12 months ago. And many people might be surprised that you come straight into market with such an impressive project. But there's a story behind that, isn't it? Because you all didn't just meet 12 months ago. There's a bit of a background there. Do you want to maybe give us a bit of a flavour of that?
Yeah, I think there's a long history, but if I try to summarize it, so really, Fidra is a continuation of West Burton Energy. So West Burton Energy was established in 2021 by EIG, who are our principal shareholder, a US infrastructure investor, and they really bought the combined cycle gas turbine plant from EDF that came with an operational battery project. It came with an excellent operations team at the site who ran the power station, but they needed to build a team around that. So when I was hired as CEO in 2021, I was given a mandate, firstly to make sure we ran the existing business successfully. So to look at the commercial aspects of the business, look to refinance the business, and ultimately to sell the business. but alongside that, also a really strong mandate to grow the business.
Mm.
And I think from that really came the idea of battery storage. So we developed the site at West Burton that we'd inherited. We acquired Thorpe Marsh in 2023, really with a strong conviction that we wanted to do more in the battery space. And then last year, where we sold the operational business, it was a good time in the market to sell the gas-fired business. But EIG, supported us, retained the battery business, and then we were renamed Fidra. So essentially, at that point in time, we'd reestablished a business, but we had a strong sponsor behind us. We had the team, and we had 2 very advanced projects in the UK.
And obviously that team is going on to build and do some really impressive things under that Fidra banner. And one of the things that I was really interested to understand was, I guess many people might think, well, we've not developed a battery site before. Let's do something a little bit smaller, maybe, not necessarily a transmission connected asset. But you come straight out with a 1.4 gigawatt asset. It's really impressive, really large numbers, really big figures we're talking about. What gave you the conviction to take such a bold step as kind of the first big thing?
Well, I think it's a good question. I think in some ways the conviction started even before we bought West Burton Energy. So the Fidra team, a lot of us have worked together before. So myself, Lisa Mackay, who's our Chief Operating Officer, Maurice Van Looy, who's our Chief Growth and Strategy Officer, we all worked together at a company called Intergen. Intergen was one of the first to develop very large battery sites. So when 50 megawatt sites were being built and people thought these are enormous battery sites, we were already developing sites that were 300, 400 megawatts in the UK. So we've always had a conviction that large scale storage would deliver something different and deliver something attractive to our investors. So we spent a lot of time convincing EIG of this, that there was an opportunity there, that for them, deploying a large amount of capital in a single project was the way forward. And then it's just like any process, it depends on the opportunities that come up. And we were fortunate in a way that the first opportunity that really landed on our desk of scale was Thorpe Marsh. So Thorpe Marsh was being developed by a company called Banks Renewables. They were up for sale, essentially. Their existing investor was selling. They had some operational wind assets, and then they had this enormous battery project. And ultimately, the buyer of their operational wind projects didn't want the battery project. That was Brookfield, so they didn't want the battery project. That gave us a great opportunity. It really fitted well with us. We sent a team to walk around the site. I can tell you there was mixed views on the walk around as to whether it was something we should do. And it took ourselves as a team a lot of time to convince ourselves, could we deliver a project of that scale on an old coal site? And I think what really helped us get there is we talked to a number of investors at the time. We talked to EIG, and really the idea of taking batteries from being what at the time was a relatively novel technology into something that was proven and bankable. When you get to that level for your technology, in some ways, scale is the key differentiating factor. If you look at what's happened on wind and solar, once the technologies have actually become proven and bankable, they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So our view is very much, well, let's take this project in 1 or 2 years when we get to financial close. Actually, we think there'll be a huge appetite for something of this size. And listen, I mean, I've been in the industry for long enough. I know that things can go in cycles. Development goes in cycles. We bought at a relatively low point in the market. We were also very fortunate, and capital costs came down very considerably, which we can talk more about. But when we looked at the project to begin with, to give you an idea, we sort of, since we first bought the project to when we actually closed financially, we'd roughly half the cost of building the project. So just in a very short period of time, we were able to sort of ride that wave of falling capital costs as well.
That's great. And obviously timing is a massive part in anything, I guess, but particularly in a project like this. And you've just got to that point, as you spoke about, of reaching financial close. And I imagine there were probably a range of emotions throughout that process. Why don't you talk me through some of the highlights, the lowlights, any of the complications that you faced in terms of getting it to this point now?
Yeah, I think that when about 12 months ago, when we started Creative Fidra, the thing that we were most worried about was, could we find parties to sell our power to? I think that was really the biggest question we had in our mind was, would there be appetite to contract for the revenues on a long-term basis for that size of asset? I think once that happens, everything else sort of falls into place. So that was really a key point of the project. And we'd already been out to market. We talked to a few people, but really the proof is in the pudding. So when you go out and you talk to people, you have conversations, is there appetite? Yes, there is, but let's now focus on getting these contracts done. So I think that was the thing that was up foremost in our mind was, could we secure those offtake contracts? I think the other thing that was foremost in our mind was, would we be able to raise enough bank finance? If you think about, I think in 2024, the total amount of project finance raised for batteries was about 500 million. That's the total amount in the UK. We were raising more than that money on a single project. So we were concerned about the depth of the banking market. Would there be enough money there? Would there be enough money from the equity side? And those were the things that were sort of, I guess, worrying us at the outset. But as we went through the process, every step of the way, we gained more confidence. We used Santander, who were our financial advisor. We did some initial sounding with the banks. We got really positive feedback. We went out to a number of offtake parties. We ended up with some really credible parties that were prepared to put the effort and time and expense into negotiating. So as we went along, it became clear that there was a real project there. I mean, as an aside, certainly, I will not name the individual involved, but one of the offtake parties at the start of it, when we first had the meeting with them, which is probably summer last year, was like, you guys must be dreaming. You'll never deliver a project of this size. And ultimately, to be fair to that individual, he did come back at the end when we delivered it and said, I think you've done an amazing job. I couldn't believe that you've done it. So I think there was definitely an element of, is it too big? Possibly, but ultimately, can we get it done? I think we just gained more confidence as we went through the process.
And having that relationship with the IG that has extended from West Burton, and you've got a management team who know each other well. You've got that relationship. How important was that throughout the early stages of getting to financial close?
A massive, and I would say that in my experience, there's three things you need for a successful business, right? You need a high quality shareholder, one that listens, one that engages, one who's aligned with your interests. You need a clear strategy, right? You can't be everything to every person. You need a team to execute that strategy. And so you cannot not have one of those items. Those are three critical ingredients. And we were very, very fortunate with the IG. They're a fantastic shareholder, team based in London, very knowledgeable about the sector, very helpful. People you can bounce ideas off as you go through the process. And ultimately for them, it was a big project for them, in terms of their level of investment. They don't do a lot of equity investments. They tend to do more sort of direct lending, preferred equity stuff. So this was a really big deal for them. One of their biggest deals probably this year. So they were fully aligned with us. They really wanted to get it done. They really wanted to be beside us and help us. And as I say, I cannot fault them for their time and their effort of their whole team to support us on it.
Absolutely. And I speak to so many people who say that relationship between your shareholders and the management team can really make or break whether a business is going to go on to succeed or whether it'll continue to face difficulties. There's loads of really exciting things ahead for you now that you've hit that milestone. And I guess your attention is probably turning into two things. I'd like to look into both of them. So both the construction side and the build of the site, but also the operations and how it's going to be run. So why don't we start with the actual build of the site? Yep. This is a huge undertaking at a scale which I guess just hasn't been done in the UK for a battery asset. How have your supply chain engaged with you? What's the feeling amongst your partners about delivering such a project like this?
So, I mean, we were very selective of our partners. Let's put it that way. We went through a 12-month tender process for the battery systems, extensive, before we chose Sungrow as our sort of battery partner. I'll come back to them in a minute. In terms of the sort of engineering design, the electrical design, the electrical erection commissioning of the batteries, again, we went through a very strong process and ultimately picked HMV as a key delivery partner for us. And then on the civil work, and I'll come back to the civil work because it's an enormous piece of work, the initial civil work, we picked Jones Brothers, who are one of the leading UK civil engineering firms. Those three are so critical to delivering the project. What maybe differentiates us from other developers is, we have a construction team that we've worked with before who really are sort of extension of Fidra, who manage those contractors. And that team's worked on projects we did at Intergen, including building gas plants, which in some ways are more complex than building battery systems. But that team is sort of embedded into the Fidra team at site and really responsible for that successful management of those partners involved. But to give you some idea of the scale, just come back to, Jones Bros, they are moving, I think it's roughly half a billion tons of pulverized fuel ash in the next 4 months. It's a massive amount of work to get the site ready to erect the batteries. H&MV then come along and they build an enormous switchyard, right, with 5 very large transformers that are coming in from Turkey and coming to the UK, as well as providing the groundworks, the erection that can be done then to put the battery containers and the containers for the medium voltage skids. There are nearly 1,000 containers that are going to have to be transported to the Thorpe Marsh site, just to give you an idea of scale. This is a huge undertaking over a relatively short period of time. So it's a very, very big project to do, but it's really about logistics and managing partners. And as I say, we're very fortunate we have that team that we've worked with before who've delivered these large scale projects in the past.
And what's the time scale that you anticipate to go through that construction period?
So as I say, we've started now. We expect to get commercial operation of the first battery array sort of mid 2027. I was getting too optimistic there for a second. Mid 2027, and then those will sort of come online. There's 5 arrays, each of about 280 megawatts each, and they'll come online over the course of the 6 months after that. So by the end of 2027, early 2028, the full project will be operational.
Wow, that's great. And I know that you are already in the position where you're thinking about operations and you're thinking about how Thorpe Marsh and West Burton Sea are going to be run as assets. And you probably have a unique opportunity to do something that most people in the BESS world haven't had the opportunity to do because of the scale, and to actually embed a team around the asset in a fixed way rather than a distributed portfolio view. Do you want to maybe talk a bit more about your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, no, it is a slightly unique operating model, should we call it, organizational model for the assets, because most batteries in the UK tend to be remotely operated or operated with the original battery manufacturer having 1 or 2 people present at site. Given the scale of Thorpe Marsh and to some extent West Burton Sea as well, that's not an operating model or organizational model that we can use. So we will want a team based at Thorpe Marsh to manage the asset alongside Sungrow, alongside H&MV in operations, but ultimately that team being responsible for continuous improvement, safety, all those things that go ultimately with the asset. And if you just put the scale of Thorpe Marsh to in some context, most large power stations in the UK are maybe 800 megawatts, 1,000 megawatts. This is even bigger than that. So it's really a critical which can instantaneously respond to fluctuations in the grid. This is a really big asset for the system operator. And so it's really important that we have people present at the site 24/7 to deal with issues as they come up. Now, like any power station, you can't always deal with issues in real time, but you have to have somebody there identifying, looking at things. And we think that's really, really important, just given the scale of it. So having a team focused on operations with a station director leading that team, reporting through into Lisa in her role as Chief Operating Officer, is something that we're acutely focused on getting in place sooner rather than later. Our experience with Intergen is the sooner you get the operations team involved in the construction period before you actually have to hand over the asset, the much smoother the transition will go, the much easier it is when you get into operations. So we're very focused on getting that team in place as quickly as possible.
That's really and a great opportunity for someone to be involved in a project like that. And I think I imagine you, as you consider the size and the scale of the asset, I'm sure there's been a lot of thought to that relationship with NISO and how you engage with them. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about that, because that's going to be relatively unique again for you as a business?
Yeah, no, it is, and I think they have a very tough job on their hands right now. To be fair to them, they've got to deliver a system by 2030 that can run on clean power, and that is a massive challenge for them from an institutional perspective, from an engineering perspective, from a commercial perspective. And it's a new organization as well, right? They've just spun out of National Grid. It's they're trying to find their feet as well. So our approach is very much, how can we help you with the system? And so we have very proactively engaged with the system operator, with Thorpe Marsh, really since we bought the project, in terms of connection agreements, in terms of electrical issues as we come up, a number of these things that we'll actually try and work with them on. And then when we come into operations, again, the idea that we have people on the site, I think is helpful for them, in a sense of you're not just operating something remotely, there are people there who can help. And we want to be there to provide that sort of flexibility in the grid ultimately. Because if you step back into the UK, what is the UK power grid? It's basically lots of demand in the south and lots of generation in the north. And where Thorpe Marsh sits in the middle, acts as that natural flexibility. And that's how we've always pitched it to the system operator, to investors, is sometimes you get lots of generation coming from the north when it's very windy, and sometimes you get less. And that ability to flex the system with a big single asset there is really important. And really to date has been done largely by Drax. If you think about Drax Power Station, it sits in the middle of the country. It sits at that interface between the north and the south. Now, whether Drax will be around for the next 5, 10, 15 years is beyond even my pay grade. But ultimately, I think Thorpe Marsh can do a similar role.
I hope you're enjoying this week's instalment of Real Assets, Real Value. This podcast is brought to you by Sonder & Metric, an executive search firm facilitating leadership appointments across the energy, infrastructure and real asset space. If you're looking to attract top-tier leaders to drive your value creation strategy and realise your growth plans, Sonder & Metric's proven search strategy guarantee exceptional results, all whilst reducing the risk associated with leadership hiring. For more information, visit our website www.sonderandmetric.com.
I suppose that with Thorpe Marsh now moving forward as it is, that could potentially provide the blueprint for how large-scale transmission-connected BESS assets operate within the UK. And I know that you will have ambitions as a business beyond the projects that are there at the moment. What does the future Fidra portfolio look like if all goes to plan?
Yeah, I think in the near term, the focus, I'll come back to Europe, but in the near term, the focus is on the GB market. So we, as you're probably aware, we now have investment from the National Wealth Fund, who are a minority investor alongside EIG. The principal reason they invested into Fidra was to help deliver that 2030 clean power target. And the fastest way to deliver that is by building very big projects rather than lots of little projects. I'm not saying there won't be lots of little projects, I'm sure there will be, but to get to those targets quickly, you have to invest in very large scale projects. So our vision, certainly at Fidra, with the support of National Wealth Fund and EIG, is to build large scale sites as quickly as possible in the GB market. So Thorpe Marsh first, then West Burton Sea, and then others to follow, right? We have another project down at Bicker Fen. We're looking at other acquisition opportunities right now. And really, I think in the UK, we want to get sort of 4 to 5 gigawatts operational before 2030, which, if you look at the storage targets for the UK, would probably give us sort of 20% of the market share of battery technology, just to put it in some context. We will have, at some point, we're going to have to make a strategic decision as a business with our investors, whether we try to replicate that model in other markets. So we've looked at Italy in the past, we've looked at Germany in the past. personally, I'm a strong believer that if you can make something work in one country, you can make it work in other countries. There are definitely localities of power markets. So if you know, very different market in Italy to what it is in the UK, different regulatory regime. But ultimately, for large scale projects, if you can find the right partners to drive down capex, lower your financing costs, then you can make projects work. So our goal is ultimately to be able to replicate that strategy. But we need to be convinced of the investment case to go into these countries. And at the moment, I would say the GB market is still by far the most advanced and most attractive for battery projects in Europe.
So we can expect to see a lot more assets in the pipeline and being announced.
Absolutely. And why not, right? I mean, we've got a strong investor base who support us. I believe we've got a different strategy to others. People are starting to adapt now and looking at bigger projects. But we've also got a team who's got a track record, right? We've delivered a project of that scale to financial close, raised money, both equity and debt to support it, brought in construction partners, brought in offtake partners. I think that gives us a really good opportunity. And my job as the CEO is to make sure we maintain that momentum. Not overreaching. There's a balance, but I think you have to take this opportunity and go after stuff. The market is there. I mean, we have essentially mandated government targets for storage. So given the position we're in, we'd be fools not to chase after more projects.
Absolutely. And that's going to be really exciting to see. And potentially for some people, a really exciting proposition to consider being a part of, because I know that you're about 11 people at this moment in time, aren't you? And that number is obviously growing. I know you're already advertising for a range of different roles. I guess one of the most important things that I see in any business who are going from a very small team to a slightly less small team is a real strong desire to retain the culture and the ethos behind what got them there. How do you do that as you grow as a business? What's important for you as you evaluate not only the skills of the individuals who you want to bring into the business, but also the mindset and the outlook as well?
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree with what you said. I mean, I would echo that the values, you can grow as a business, you'll have different operating models, but if you can keep the culture that we've got today, that will serve us in good stead. And so for me, when we're looking for individuals, the things that we really think about is we look through the lens of our values, right? At Fidra, we have, 4 key values. Number one, we want people to be bold, right? And make decisions that, make decisions essentially. That's what we're looking for. We're not looking for people who will look to defer or delegate that. So we want people to go out and take responsibilities. And that's really important. I think that's embedded within the management team, right? That's what we like to do. Informed decisions, of course, but we do want people to make decisions. So that's important. I think we want people to be innovative. I mean, I think we're not an R&D business, but when we talk about projects, we want people to come up with ideas of how to overcome barriers, how to deal with challenges in projects. That is a absolutely critical skill in project development. And if you don't have that skill, you're probably not the right type of person to come to Fidra, because even as we move into operations, that's exactly the type of person we want there. We're a progressive culture, so we're not going to sit back and just look internally. We like to look externally. We like to see what's going on in the rest of the market. We'll learn from others. If others are doing things better than us, we'll go and find out a way of doing that and copying it and do it. So we're not sort of saying, well, we're the best and nobody else can do as good as us. We're very much outward looking. I think that's important. And we're authentic, right? In the sense that we are direct with each other. We're definitely a culture where we try to keep a very flat reporting structure so we don't end up with me hearing it from the fifth person. We have a very flat structure and we like to give people that responsibility to get on with. That will probably be the biggest challenge going forward. So we grow out and become more operationally focused and the organizational model changes. It's just keeping that culture, saying to people that you have a very clear responsibility, get on and deliver this. And I think that's the thing that I want to embed in the people who join, because I have that today and I wouldn't want to lose that.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting, and there's going to be a lot of people who are looking out for the opportunities that come out with Fidra. And I guess we'd encourage them to explore and to get in touch if they see something particularly interested in. That's great, Chris. And what I'd like to do now is to just maybe move on to talking a bit more about you as an individual, because I love to hear the stories behind the people who are doing the big things in the industry. And you started out your career, didn't you, as a corporate finance lawyer? So what prompted you to move into the energy sector?
Yeah, no, I did start on the dark side. So yes, it's a good question. I think, well, to go back to my career, so I trained as a lawyer. I was very much, well, that was the thing to do at the time. It was, I was going to university and doing a law degree. I came out, I worked in a Scottish law firm for a few years. I enjoyed it. The thing I enjoyed most about it was doing transactions. That was actually the thing I really enjoyed. But I just wanted a change, and and like all these things, or in my career anyway, I found that it wasn't necessarily I wasn't planning to do it. I didn't think, oh, I really want to work in the energy sector. That's definitely the thing I want to do. I'd done some oil and gas work, as you do when you work in Scotland. Really hadn't done very much at all in electricity. But when I made the decision I wanted to move in-house, and I was working in industry, in Edinburgh at the time, I would say 80% of the jobs were in financial services, right? So this was pre-financial crisis. There was lots of jobs working for Royal Bank of Scotland, all these companies essentially at the time. And it just didn't appeal to me. It didn't feel real to me in some ways. And then this job advert came along for Intergen, which frankly I'd never heard of at the time. Turned out to be this very unique business in the sense of it was an independent power producer. It had sort of 10 gigawatts of assets, and they were looking for sort of a head of legal for Europe, which covered the UK and the Netherlands. They didn't have anyone on the ground in Europe. They had a team in the US at the time. And I thought, oh, that'd be quite interesting. I'll go and do a challenge there. And so that's really how I got into the energy industry. I think what's kept me in the industry is the people I worked with at Intergen at that time were incredibly passionate about their jobs, highly motivated, took the time to really teach me about things, teach me about the sector, tell me about all the acronyms in the electricity sector, which now drive everyone mad, but really took the time with me. And those first 2 or 3 years I spent at Intergen were probably the most formative of my career, in the sense of I just got to know an industry so well that, as I say, I hadn't really known before then at all. And at that point, that was it. I was sold. Energy, electricity, that's what I was going to do.
I mean, it sounds, you speak so positively about that time at Intergen. And it's, as you said, it sounds like a really formative time of your career, 16 years in time span. What are some of the biggest lessons that you learnt over your time there that you've taken forward with you?
I think that that entrepreneurial culture is something I took really positively from there. So although Intergen was a big global business, actually the number of people working in it wasn't that big. We had maybe sort of 150 across the globe in offices, plus all the people at power stations. And right through that, there was this culture of, we need to get off and do stuff. We want to be entrepreneurial. Let's get stuff done. And I think that really had an impact on me, because there were so many barriers put up at Intergen, not by the people there, but ultimately by our shareholders to some extent. But despite all that, the business, not only did the business survive, it thrived. It took a number of really brave investment decisions over that period. And it was just the people there who were just so passionate and engaged. And I think whenever I look at when I came to Westburn Energy and I went to Fidra, these are the things I wanted. I wanted people there who shared that same level of passion and motivation for the job around me at the table. Because without that, the biggest lesson that I would say at other businesses I've seen, if you don't have that, you're just not going to get there. You're not going to get engaged staff. So there were lots of positives, really many more positives than negatives at Intergen. Huge support for me in my professional development. I mean, they supported me through doing an MBA. They supported me transitioning from being a lawyer into project development and then into trading. They gave me an opportunity to work in the US for 3 years, which was fantastic. So I couldn't really say a bad word about the business. I think that the challenge was ultimately we just couldn't get stuff done to the shareholders. So I go back to my original point about what has it been to be a successful business. You can have a great team and a great strategy. If you don't have the right shareholder, frankly, it's all a bit of a waste of time.
Tell me a bit more on that team bit then, because Intergen is where you met a number of the people within your team. I mean, how important have those individuals been on your journey and also in the work that you're doing today?
Oh, massively important. I mean, I've worked with, within the team at Fidra, we have, Lisa, who I've worked with for probably the best part of 20 years, Morris, similar, slightly less, but similar, in the growth team. And a number of people who work with them, right, who've come to the business as well. So it was really, really important. I've probably broken all of the HR rules about who you should never recruit people you work with before. But genuinely, when I went to West Burton, I was on my own. It was my first role as CEO. The fact that, in some ways I didn't even have to ask those individuals to come. They wanted to come. They saw an opportunity with West Burton Energy, and then ultimately Fidra was for me, fantastic, and very, very fortunate, because we were having to grow a business quite quickly. So bringing those individuals on board was important. Finding the right balance of the team was important as well. So yes, I've worked with a lot of these people in Intergen, but we also hired Tony Julius, our CFO. I wanted somebody who was not an Intergen person in the team, in the management team. So that was really, really important that I had that as well. And then we hired people from other parts of the business. So it's finding the right balance, right? It's good to have people there you work with for a long time, but it's also important to bring independent thought in and challenge in. So that was always the sort of balance I was trying to strike.
And you spoke there about that experience of being a first-time CEO. What was that like? And how did you how did you feel, I guess, that EIG had placed trust in you as a first-time CEO, having not done that role before?
I was super excited. In some ways, I'd done the role at Intergen as the managing director for the UK. So it was a bigger business than West Burton Energy. But coming in to be the CEO of a business, is a little bit of a daunting prospect, particularly when at the time it was sort of me and the power station team at West Burton. And I was very lucky at the time. I had a fantastic power station manager who came up to see me in Edinburgh, and we had a good time. We went out and had dinner, and it really sort of eased my mind that this was the right business to go with. But it was incredibly daunting. I mean, I don't know if when I came in at the end of 2021, you may recall that was when sort of the power market started to go quite volatile, shall we say, in the UK. We had very low wind, we had outages, and we had very high power prices. So we had issues around credit. We were essentially owing a lot of money at the time as we came in, as most businesses were in the UK. We still had COVID. So I couldn't physically go to the power station for the first couple of months, which was really challenging. Coming into a new team, trying to remotely manage was hard. And then we had the gas crisis, right? So we had the beginning of the Ukraine war. We had the gas crisis spike as well. So all of this was creating a huge amount of volatility. And so a lot of the work I did in the first 6 months, as well as bringing in the right people in the team, was just managing through a crisis. It really was like that. It was every day. Where do we stand? Are we going to have cash to fulfill our obligations? It was a pretty intimidating and daunting time. But again, like I said before, I was really, really fortunate that we had EIG as a shareholder. They were incredibly patient, very supportive, and despite some of the challenges, really backed the business at that time. And it's paid off for them. They did very well out of their investment, but it took a lot for them to go through that.
And I guess throughout those changes in leadership positions for you and those different opportunities that you've been able to take up, how would you say that your leadership philosophy has developed over time?
I go back to two sort of things that I've read or have been taught through leadership philosophy, right? So I remember the first leadership course I did with Intergen was by Lencioni's. I don't know if you've heard of it. So it's all about number one team. And that was a really powerful thing for me I took away, because that is really about the idea that leadership team, that is your number one team. You might manage a function, but ultimately the leadership team is the number one team, and you must put the time and effort into that team to make that team work, because if that team doesn't function, the rest of the business doesn't really function either. So that was really impactful for me. So I've always, as I've gone through and as I've stepped up into higher roles in organizations, I've always focused on the team around me. That is so important, that you have the right mix of individuals who are prepared to challenge you as an individual and say, well, actually, I don't agree with you, and this is why. I think that's so important, really, really important. So that really resonates. So my team, my culture, and my values are very much about getting the top team right is so important. And then I read another book, which again had this sort of really big impact on me, which is called From Good to Great, which is about Jim Collins. Jim Collins wrote the book. It's quite an old book, actually, about business. And it talks about, it's done a lot of quantitative analysis about companies and how they've gone from being good to great. And again, the sort of conclusions of that are very much around, it's the most important thing is who you get alongside you. Right? You can have, again, you have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have the team to deliver it, you're not going to be able to deliver it. And so he focuses a lot on, you can determine strategy afterwards, get the right people together first. And so before we even got into a strategy discussion at Westburn Energy with EIG, I was very much focused on, who do I get in the team? Because they were pushing me to say, come on, tell us what you want to do, what the technology is, how do you want to, and I was like, we need to have the right people in the room to have that discussion. So I think for me, it's always been about getting the right people together. Once I've done that, I mean, another comment my previous manager interchanged to me was like, when you get into that role, you almost become like the HR director. I mean, I'm no HR director. I have a fantastic HR director at Fidra, and she is absolutely brilliant. But you almost become a little bit of that role where really you're not doing the stuff. You're not the player manager anymore. You're just really making sure that you maintain the values of the business and supporting the people around you to deliver what they have to deliver. And so that's where one of the challenges, I think, as a CEO, and I find, is you really have to step back from the day-to-day stuff, and you focus much more on relationship management
and having the right people around you who you trust enables you to, I guess, be able to comfortably step back, or maybe not comfortably, but it enables you to do it and to fulfill those other parts of your role.
Absolutely. And look, it's not just about the executive team there. I mean, a big part of my role as a CEO is managing upwards. So, really making sure that we, work closely with the board. I've got a new shareholder on board now with National Wealth Fund, and that will now, I'll have to form relationships with them. I'll have to continue to build on my relationships with EIG, because all the good work that you do, you still got to make sure you convince them to deploy their capital to do the right things. And that comes from relationships. It comes from building trust. So again, a lot of my role is about doing that. It's about that shareholder management. It's about relationship building there. But yeah, I think it's, coming from that background where you like doing stuff as a lawyer, you like getting stuff done, you like writing stuff down, having to step back in that. I find that incredibly challenging. I would tell you that everyone in my team says that's incredibly challenging for me, but I really am trying hard to make sure that works, because I just don't have the time to do it now.
Absolutely. And one thing I always like to wrap things up on is to ask the question, if you were to give a piece of advice to someone early on in their career within the energy sector, maybe someone who is looking at the things that you've been through and you've been able to achieve, and think, you know what, I'd love to be able to look back on my career and achieve similar things. What advice would you give to someone ambitious and wanting to progress?
I think I would say be courageous. I reflect on the things that I've done in my career and say sometimes I should have been braver to take decisions earlier. But, if you're fortunate to have a situation where, you've got, I'm very fortunate, I've got fantastic family at home that supports me. But, if you've got that background, or you've got a background where you feel safe in yourself, don't be afraid to go and take professional challenges. Be courageous. Go and do things that challenge you, make you feel uncomfortable, because just playing in your lane, you'll never achieve, the objectives if you set out on that objective. It's not for everyone, but if you want to get to the top and to become an MD or a CEO or a head of a function, you have to play outside of your lane. You have to go and do other things. I was quite happy doing law for 5 or 6 years, but ultimately I didn't see the pathway there, and I think you've just got to choose that and say, you know what, I want to go down a different pathway, even if it's something that frankly I'm not very good at today, but I know I can get better at by doing these things. So be courageous, I think, is a bit of advice I would give to people.
That is great advice. Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining us. It's been great to chat with you. And thank you for listening to the Real Assets, Real Leaders podcast. We hope you join us again for the next installment.